Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I am here with Holly Anthony. Now, Holly is a fractional COO, and she has a ton of interesting things to share with us. So without further ado, Holly, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Ben. I really appreciate it. You have a ton of awesome content, and it's an honor to be here today.
Awesome. You are about to be added to that content with this interview today, and I'm excited to hear you and talk through what you do because it's pretty unique. And I have to say, up until like a couple of years ago, I didn't even know it existed as a path. So I find it to be really interesting. So if anyone goes to your LinkedIn and they go, okay, who is this Holly person on the video? They're going to see that you're a fractional COO. Could you explain to the people what a fractional COO is? What does it mean? What do they do? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So a fractional COO works a fraction of the work week. So a lot of times this is a cost-effective way for a company to hire very top executive talent and draw them into their company, because otherwise they may not be able to really afford the full salary of a COO. So it's a great way to bring in that talent. Now that can look like different types of engagements. It might be that you're on for a couple of months to solve a specific problem. It may be that you're there, halftime. It may be that you're just advising. It could be getting your hands dirty. So a lot of different things. A lot of times what I find is that the CEO comes to me and they're just struggling. They're working on everything in the business, and they're frazzled and they need to get things under control, and they want to find a way to get their business to the next level. So it could be something specific like we need a new sales department. We want to increase client happiness. We've got a problem with our pricing models. So specific problems, or it could be really broad, like I don't know what we need, but I know we need to level up and we want to get traction. Come in and take a look. Symptoms of that might be things like a lot of discussion, a lot of talking, not a lot of execution and problem solving. So
Hmm.
I'll come in as a problem solver to ramp that business.
Okay, that's so interesting. So for the people at home and myself, if I'm understanding it correctly, you've got you've got a company. Maybe they don't have a COO. Maybe they're smaller. Maybe they're scaling, and they're at the point where I can't bring on a full COO, but I would still love someone to come in and for some part of the week help me and solve big issues and help with strategy, and that's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought you brought up a really cool point about that this is more of a recent thing. I think there have always been consultants and business
Yeah.
advisors, but I don't know if it's one of the silver linings of coming out of COVID. But these are people that you can hire to come in and maybe be remote or hybrid a lot of times, and pull in top talent from anywhere to
Yeah.
come in and get really active in your business. They don't necessarily have to be there locally or a full-time hire. And I think that's why we're starting to see this fractional term really
Yeah.
become successful and really become something that we're seeing out as we're looking at talent.
Yeah, it's so interesting because as someone who's been in recruitment for 15 years and has worked with small companies and large companies, I just think it's such a benefit because when you look at these small companies who are scaling and growing and they're dealing with new and dynamic issues that maybe they're not equipped to solve or they haven't experienced them historically, they would never be able to go and get someone who is a high power, highly effective, experienced person to run along beside them because they don't have the value proposition to maybe bring that person in full time. They couldn't afford them. And now you get that person and you get a portion of them for the time that I just think it's like an amazing solution. It's like an amazing opportunity that didn't always exist,
Yeah.
um, which is really cool. So how did you get into it? So like, how does one find themselves as a fractional COO?
I think similar to most things that come to us, like I feel like it just kind of came to me. I don't know that I was necessarily had this planned as my next step, but my
Yeah.
last company had a successful sale, and that's the moment where you're kind of taking stock, like, okay, what's next? What am I going to do? And I realized that I had really just been having so much fun having conversations with other business people, and I was already essentially doing this like small snippets of being a COO for people who didn't have COOs, and I was just
Yeah.
so interested to hear about the nuggets of their business. For me, it's so juicy to come in and see all of these complexities and really start to map out a solution and be like, oh, did you ever try this thing? Like you should, let's do this. And this would change the way that your business is running. And so those conversations have been very fruitful. So I think that that's the draw for me, is getting
Yeah.
exposure to a lot of different industries that I otherwise wouldn't probably go into as a full-time COO. So I've done some consulting on integrative physical physical therapy? How do they up their pipeline for companies that they want to work with? Or a general contractor and builder who really needs to track sales and profits. Like these are types of industries that you can go into and really pinpoint and go deep on a solution for something that they're facing. And for me, it's the juiciness of the variety and the challenge and feeling like, it's almost kind of like being an ER doctor for business. You're coming
Yeah.
in right at this moment where there's something critical and you can really dive into that. And I think that that's the fun part of it.
Yeah. Wow. So interesting. And gosh, again, I keep going back to like how helpful that would be to like in that moment when you feel like you're not sure how to solve it or move the ball down the field, to be able to tap someone on the shoulder who can come in and just be that person who drives a solution for you. It's just such a benefit because I think being an entrepreneur, having a small business, trying to grow it is difficult. It's challenging and you're not always going to have all the answers. So being able to connect with someone who does have the answers is, I think, is really powerful. Okay, so I get that it's like, I get like kind of the moving around piece of it. And I get that, okay, like maybe you're there for 25% of the week as opposed to it being the full-time job. But can you compare and contrast any other differences that might exist between a fractional COO and the traditional
Yeah,
COO?
yeah, sure. I think the fun part of being fractional is that you're hyper focused and there's a big challenge in that.
Yeah,
And any role in a COO, you're going to really have to be choosy about where you're spending your time because you're essentially
yeah,
driving the business, right? You're driving all aspects of the business to success. And so, where do you spend your time and what gets priority is really important. That becomes even more so true when you're not working that 40 or 60-hour week or whatever that is. Every moment that you spend has to be critical and has to be for a cause, and there has to be some output for it. So I think that that is a big difference in traditional COO. The one thing I think that gets a little bit more lost is when you're the traditional COO, you are truly part of that team for the long haul. And so your relationship, I think, among the staff, how you all grow together, getting that place where 3 years later, you're looking back and you're like, remember how we were 3 years ago? We didn't know anything. And that camaraderie or building a team together and growing yourselves personally and that intimacy, I think is something that's a benefit. So if people are looking to this as a career path, then those are things that they'll definitely want to think through. I know a lot of fractional C-suite on the other hand, is really interested in what does it look like to not work a 40-hour work week. I have not taken advantage of that yet. I'm probably working way too much, but I think a lot of people get into this because they are experts in their field, but they don't want to work 40 hours. So, how do you have this great career, but also balance it more with work life? So people who are looking at this type of a career, I think that that's a cool question to be asking.
yeah. It's when I was listening to your answer there, one of the things that came to me is I was listening about like you're not going to get to build those relationships as you like scale, and you don't have that historical knowledge and that maybe relational equity that you gain when you grow over time with a group of people. But the trade-off there is you do have impartiality and you do have a different perspective. So where some people maybe they have such strong relationships and that can keep them from making the hard decisions, I think a fractional COO would be able to look at it from a different lens and then make decisions in a vacuum based on what's best for the business. And not that traditional COOs don't have to do that from time to time, but gosh, I would imagine it's a lot more clear and less clouded as someone who comes in and goes, I'm going to solve specific problems.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that that's absolutely true. And it's not to say, I mean, I absolutely have rich relationships as a fractional COO.
100%.
I do have those rich relationships, but I got to use more tools in my toolkit, right? Because it's not a
Yeah.
given that I'm sitting next to somebody 8 hours every single day. And so it does become important to say, how do you drive and motivate these changes? How do you drive and motivate these teams? What are the right decisions and how do you do it with impartiality? So I think you're right.
Yeah. It's also cool to like think like, I have 20% of the time that I might usually have in a week. What is the big problem? What is the thing I need to solve? And I think that's really interesting too, like having just that ticking clock of like, okay, time is a premium. And we're busy, everyone's busy. So time's always at a premium. But it's not like a super premium if the time you're there, is, not as, it's fractional.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but when you're in a regular 40-hour work week, it's easy to get sucked into emails and conversations and things that are huge time burners. And, there's no opportunity for that. It really is like every single minute of your day needs to be for an outcome of moving that business forward.
Yeah, totally. Um, this talking about the comparing and contrasting and the different roles, I think one thing is probably the same with both, and that's there are certain qualities that make an effective COO. So whether it's traditional COO, fractional COO, when you're just thinking about the seat in general, what do you think makes an effective COO?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think truthfully, it's very much being service minded. And I think when you hear these C-suite titles, sometimes they can sound glamorous, but at the end of the day, the COO job is kind of a grunt work one. Like we can name all of these famous, Elon Musk and, all of these people by name, the visionaries, but we don't know our CEOs in the same way. A lot of times they're kind of the second in command. They're working their tail off. They could be looking at, how do we raise up career pathways? What is the right pay model to compensate our employees the right way? So there's a lot of responsibility in that. How are we keeping our clients happy? What is the value that we're bringing to the world, right? And so what is this bigger picture externally as well? So being in that servant mindset, I think, is so key to being a COO, because you want to raise everything up. And so that means you are beholden to everybody inside and outside of that company to do that job. So I think that that's a big piece of it. If you're very good at it, it is a ton of work if you're very good at it.
Yeah.
I think strategy is a big one. So you've got kind of the brass tacks on one side of, okay, we want to make money. We're a business, right? So, or we at least need to be stable, even if we're not going for profitability. So what is the health of the business and how do we achieve that? And then also the cultural piece. I think some of us have experienced in jobs where you get to Sunday night and you feel that pit in your stomach because Monday morning is coming. And I never want to be at that company, right? Like I want to create the company where everybody's jazzed and we're moving in the same direction. So strategic mindset is so important. How am I going to get this profitability or health piece? How am I going to get this culture piece? And I want both of those singing, and I need an action plan to execute against that. So that is so key. You can have a lot of people working in operational roles, but being able to do that at a highly strategic level, to have that vantage point across the landscape of a company, that's really where you're going to get your all-star spectacular COOs. That's another one. And probably just on the gooier part,
Yeah.
like love and hope, right? Somebody who's love and hopeful. We got to know we're in this together and we're about to do something awesome. What are the things we're going to put in place to get there? And so having that positivity and not foolish optimism by any means, but having that positivity to know how, even within your culture, that you're going to be hopeful and expectant that, your business is going to snap into place and things are about to start happening for you.
Yeah, that is a lot of things. I was like listening to you, like there's so much to do, but and
I'm
I
high.
really,
I am highly opinionated about what it takes to be a good COO, and I think there are
yeah.
great ones out there.
Well, and it is a lot of things. Like it is a consequential position, and the decisions you make have a significant impact on the lives of the working lives of everyone there, good or bad. It's so I agree. And the gooey part at the end, I mean, quite frankly, I mean, some of the best leaders are inspirational leaders because not lost in the strategy, not lost in the profitability should be the fact that at the end of the day, a truly effective COO is someone people want to follow. And
Absolutely.
that balance of realism with optimism and getting people to lean in and buy in is critical. And it's really important. Um, okay, so I have one more question left, and this is a
Okay.
question that has nothing to do with work. What are you passionate about outside of work?
Oh gosh. I do a lot of reading for fun. So not like Wall
Okay.
Street, but I do a lot of reading for fun. I think the last book that I finished up was The Women. I think that's Kristen Hanna. Um,
Okay.
and it's about the women who participated in Vietnam, which sounds kind of heavy for this interview, but my dad
Yeah.
had passed away recently and was a medic in Vietnam. And this book
Oh,
actually
wow.
tracks with a nurse, a female nurse who enlisted, her course as being, in the medical community in Vietnam, and then her reentry into America. And I guess you know what it is like reading like that transports you into a different experience. So,
Yeah.
being able to live that life and see maybe some of the perspective that my father had or that people in Vietnam had is incredible. And, I don't always go for the serious, read like Harry Potter, and who wouldn't want to be a wizard for a day, or, read
Yeah.
some classics. So I think I have a lot of variety in my reading life, but I love that. And I have family, I live on the water. So just a lot of fun and getting out and all the things people love.
I mean, hard to argue with reading and getting out on the water. Those are two wonderful things. Well, Holly, thank you so much for sharing today. I think the audience should get a really good look into a really interesting profession and the impact, the intricacies, and what's required. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here.